The reality is sometimes, for instance, for the sake of our national security, the United States works with governments that do not fully respect the universal rights of their citizens. These are choices that I, as president, constantly have to make.
President Obama talking Tuesday about the balance between national security and the nations he forms alliances with, as we continue to wait for him to address those allies and the world at the United Nations. The five Arab country alliance helping with the airstrikes over Syria has brought together, as this headline puts it, Persian Gulf nations at odds. Joining me now to talk about the allies is Indira Lakshmanan, senior correspondent for Bloomberg News, and Colonel Evelio Otero, who led the first ever U.S. Central Command headquarters in Qatar. Evelio, I want to start with you. Good morning to both of you. How surprised are you at what nations have been a part of this campaign, particularly Qatar, where you've spent so much time?
Well, I'm very surprised. They, in the past, back in 2001, they participated, they'd signed up. The only ones that we actually counted on going to Afghanistan was the United Arab Emirates. They were willing to put boots on the ground. That was key. The other countries are fairly limited in their air force and their air capabilities, which makes this situation quite interesting because they have offered support. None of them have offered troops on the ground. If anybody does, I would think it would be the United Arab Emirates. So it's a fairly loose coalition without too much teeth yet.
Indeed, the president is clearly pushing the importance of these five Arab countries involved in the airstrikes. How important are they, for example, going into this UN address? The fact that you already have five is a pretty good statement.
Right. It's significant because it shows that it's not just the United States and the normal partners you would think of, like the UK or even France, but this is the United States with five Arab allies, predominantly Sunni allies. I thought it was really interesting that he made the point of yesterday speaking specifically to the human rights records of some of these allies of ours. You know, keep in mind, the United States public has been so upset because of the beheading of the two American journalists and the one British aid worker. In fact, Saudi Arabia has beheaded already dozens of people this year who were tried and found guilty of crimes, some of them nonviolent. So the United States has an ongoing dialogue about human rights with some of these allies of ours. But it's key because it shows that even though we don't have a United Nations resolution, that the United States has some other countries who are not the typical Western alliance willing to come forward and participate in this military campaign. Just within the last hour, though, we had the French Prime Minister coming out before his public and saying, don't expect the French to participate in this because there is no UN resolution and we don't have the permission of Syria.
That's interesting, Evelio. And let's talk a little bit about the countries that are not participating so far. I mean, France and Indira just talked about France. But, for example, Turkey is not in any way involved. Let's talk about militarily what the United States could expect from the countries they already have and other countries that maybe aren't joining.
Well, the United States has to make a decision, and it already has, that is going to lead. And I applaud the president for deciding to conduct the airstrikes and so strongly. But the issue is not so much the airstrikes and making the decision. The military decision here is what is going to be in the long run. We already know that it's going to be a prolonged campaign. The president had said so. There have been general officers that have advised that to the president. But when you talk about prolonged campaign, then you're talking about boots on the ground. Then you're talking about the effects, the geopolitical effects on the region. Turkey has never been a player since 1991. They didn't help in the Iraqi war. The northern flank was blocked, and now they're doing the same thing. They are more concerned about the situation in Kurdistan, so I don't expect them to be a major player. The thing that is quite fascinating from the military perspective is the role of any troops in Syria. That is more dicey because that does have the presence of Russia. That does have the concerted, if you will, somewhat agreed role by Assad of the United States troops in United States attacks into Syria. But it is very dicey. And what role on the ground in the long run? The question is, who will put boots on the ground?
And Indira, and to pick up on Evelio's point, where does the leader of Syria, Assad, fit into all of this? I mean, this is a very dangerous area.
Yeah, this is fascinating because for the past 3 years since the uprising started against Bashar al-Assad, our government has been saying he needs to step aside. We've tried a number of diplomatic initiatives. None of them have worked. But as we know, the president has not been willing to engage in airstrikes aimed at him, at getting Assad out of power. Now, here's a case where we don't have his permission to be doing airstrikes over his country. At the same time, even though he has air defenses, we know he hasn't engaged those. And in a way, it's very good for him, for the United States to be taking care of this problem for him, because ISIL is also an enemy for Assad. Now, the problem is the United States does not want Assad to be able to capitalize on these gains and move his forces into these areas. But certainly the opposition members, the Syrian opposition folks who I have spoken to, are worried about that. They're worried about Assad benefiting from this, and they're worried about civilian casualties and people, you know, women and children and innocent people getting stuck in the middle of all this. So there's also the risk that it may cause on the ground more jihadism, more support for ISIL out of anger from people who are being bombed from both sides, Assad and this new coalition.
More than 200,000 Syrians have already died in the last couple of years. Indira Lakshmanan and Evelio Otero, to both of you, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.